but they are very clearly very European.
Yeah.
And it's kind of Western European. It's not what you see.
The illustration style of Mexico and North America at that time when the Spanish had come was very different.
And that even just the illustration style of that time in Spain was totally... You don't see naked women from Spain in this period. In fact, you see, like, really covered in black clothing, very, like, morose women from Spain in this period. So I wonder if they have a theory to kind of reconcile that.
Of course, this is New Spain. Let's not forget.
And that's exactly it, because you got to remember that there's multiple cultures that have been conquered, and they have different beliefs, and they have a different way of doing things, and it may have been this weird melting pot.
I guess, yeah.
And here's something that they write, because they do try to address the text. They don't try and crack it, but they do try and address it.
Yeah, what do you say?
And I'm going to, let me read this directly here. A search of the surviving codices and manuscripts from Nueva España in the 16th century reveals the calligraphy of the Voynich manuscript to be similar to the Codex Osuna, which is 1563 to 1566, evidently was written in Mexico City. Loan words for the plant and animal names have been identified from the classical, and again, I'm going to apologize on the pronunciation.
Nahuatl.
How is that again?
Nahuatl?
That one?
Nahuatl, I'm sorry.
Nahuatl, yes. That, the Spanish, the Taino, and Mixtecs, which are all different cultures in that area. So they're kind. To me, it sounds like we're melting them all together. Everybody's together, and the styles are all kind of shifting together, and they're similarities.
I gotta say that I didn't think the calligraphy was all that similar.
It's not. Well, and this is the issue. Right? It's the same thing again. I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but we go back to Da Vinci. Yeah, the style is the same, but everybody kind of used the same kind of writing implement, which forces you to write in a similar manner, but they're not the same.
I don't know. I kind of like the theory that, like, it's another relic of the Aztecs.
And that's kind of where this points. I never saw them come out directly and say, this is an Aztec language derivative, but you really kind of get that sense from the way they write about it.
I see that, but again, the Codex Osuna was written by by Spaniards. Correct? Not by Aztecs.
Right.
And so, these guys actually took the trouble to learn this ancient written language of the Aztecs before they murdered them.
Well, but if you think about not every Aztec would have been killed. Some of them would have escaped, either as slaves or free people who then got a job and they pass this on to their children. You've got to hang on to your cultures, as every culture does. Teach it to your children so it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And some of that might have bled through.
I got to tell you, I looked at some of the alphabets and of the indigenous peoples, like the Mayans, the Olmecs, and the Aztecs, and they didn't seem to have a written alphabet so much as hieroglyphics. And so, I mean, I don't know that there's any evidence that any of the indigenous cultures here had any kind of writing system like this.
But I gotta be honest, I think one of the most compelling theories, in terms of who might have written this, is that it was, like a slave language or a gypsy roving caravan language, because it just kind of fits the parameters, right? It's a language that's actively trying to be not what a lot of people are writing then. It's meant to be a private language, but that it's written for a lot of people, but that it was a group of people that could have very easily been integrated into a different culture or died out. I think that's a very interesting idea.
It is, with that theory, the problem I have with it is that there would be other remnants of this language around, instead of just this one thing. And so that's why I find that a little hard to believe.
But that's also the hard part about history, and especially areas that are in a lot of turmoil during history. Think about all the relics from the past that have been burned and destroyed
We're good at
through
destroying
wars.
stuff.
Or
Think about all the
fires
libraries that
or-
have been burned.
Yeah, I mean
know.
these things.
True.
People gather. Oh my gosh, these are all the same. We've got to house them. We've got to protect them. And then somebody drops a lamp, and the whole thing goes up in smoke.
Yeah.
So it could be that they had
Yeah.
collected all this stuff, and somebody was writing it, and it was the interlibrary loan of the Aztec world, and they sent it to somebody else, and then the entire library goes up in flames. And here's the one surviving copy of it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one thing I could conceive of is that imagine an ancient surviving text from somewhere, something that's really, really old, and somebody like a monk along about the 14th, 15th century finds it, and it's kind of crumbling, and he thinks, I've got nothing else going on in my life, so maybe what I'll do is I'm going to copy this whole thing over, even though I don't even quite understand it. Copy the whole thing over, and just so it's preserved for posterity. And so maybe if this thing is actually real, which again I'm not buying into that entirely, but maybe if it is, maybe it actually dates back a lot further.
And somebody basically made a hand copy of
Somebody
it,
copied it,
and
yeah.
that's the one we have. So
That's the one
we're
we
looking
have.
at a flawed copy, is what you're saying.
No, it might be a meticulous copy, but it's a copy, so that means that number one, it's not going to be precise.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
That
going
it
to
would
it's not
be-
going to be a Xerox.
Yeah, and it could be potentially, thousands.
That's
of
what I'm
years
saying.
older.
It's
Yeah.
just something that could be much, much older than the 14th or 15th centuries.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
that's a good theory. I hadn't even thought about that before.
I only thought about it just now.
Well, while we're on crazy theories,
Oh, let's go to crazy
Oh, yes.
theories.
I
Yes.
have one because I feel like that's like a little bit of a loony theory.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
What, my theory?
Yeah, I like the lunacy of it.
Yeah.
This one, however,
That's even loonier.
I shouldn't be cruel, right? I should be,
But you are.
but a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's have it.
There's a guy,
What's the guy's name?
Vico Latvala.
Latvala? Yeah. That's a crazy name.
It's a pretty crazy
He
name.
must be crazy.
Yeah. So he thinks that the Voynich manuscript details the spontaneous creation of DNA through the use of sound or a direct line from God.
Yeah. No,
I shouldn't laugh.
it all
No,
makes
I'm not
sense,
making
yeah.
fun of anything. Keep going, because this is where it gets
Well,
worse.
so basically, he thinks that this manuscript is not something to be deciphered. It is something to read and pray on and channel prophecy directly from God.
Yeah.
So he says it's religious text, basically.
Yeah. So
Well,
he.
more than even a religious text, it sounds like it's kind of like,
It's like-
the Ark of the Covenant. It's
Well-
actually it channels enormous energies. Is
Right.
that-
No,
is
I
that-
guess
am reading that right?
how I would describe it is like when people speak in tongues. That it's like written in tongues almost, right?
Okay.
And that like you could read it and pray on it and meditate on it, and if you were the special kind of chosen person by God, he would come down to you and say, "Oh, yeah, this is what it means." So he's actually using this method, has deciphered some of it for us, and I will read to you what he says it is. This is verbatim.
And again, he deciphered this how? Just through
Just
God?
by praying on it and God
Oh, okay.
telling him.
All right.
Because he's one of the worthy people.
I got to say, that's a pretty cool encipherment system. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
unbreakable.
Okay, so the name of the flower is Heart of Fire. It makes the skin beautiful when made in ointment. The oil is pressed from the buds. The ointment is used for the wrinkles. It is suitable for the kidneys and the head. As the flower prevents inflammations, it is antibiotic. Plant is 10 centimeters in its height. It grows hot and dry slants. The plant is bright green by its color.
Huh. And it's in Ethiopia.
Somewhere in Ethiopia.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're welcome, everyone.
Well, actually, I've got some wrinkles. I'm going to Ethiopia.
Yeah. I guess, but it's like, how hard is it to believe somebody who says, well, I am the only person who can
That's
decipher
convenient.
this?
Yeah.
Through the years, there's been a lot of charlatans that have come
Yeah.
forward and said they had the translation. And I'm not going to pitch a stone at this guy, but he seems to be part of that camp to me. That's kind of.
Most likely, yeah.
It just seems too convenient,
Yeah,
especially for something that's so popular.
The thing that I know about people who actually receive prophecies is that they don't go around screaming about it, and they don't speak in the way that this guy is speaking, which is like, I'm so much better than you. I know everything, and this is what.
So there's a little arrogance in there that you don't appreciate.
That arrogance. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that, like, if you, okay, fine, whatever, you're going to receive your prophecy from God, sure.
It should come with a little humility. 'Cause
Yeah,
because think
maybe
about it
don't say you're the greatest person in the world.
Well, exactly, because, leave that to your followers to do.
And
because-
I've now set up a website where you can donate at.
Yeah, because I know, if I've got a direct line to God, I don't want to piss God off and queer that whole deal, So I'm gonna totally be, humble about the whole thing.
I don't know. It's just a weird situation.
That's a really incoherent theory. What about the lizard people?
Dr. Bax suggested this theory.
Yeah, he said one of
Well,
his.
somebody
I'm sorry.
suggested it
I guess
to
that's
him.
Suggested it to him. Yeah.
Let's not misrepresent him.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
suggested this theory.
Yeah, that there's like subterranean lizard people.
So what do you think? Do you want to let him tell it?
Yeah, let's have this
Let the
one.
doctor
'cause
tell us.
He had a pretty good take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, a recent one, I actually appeared on Coast to Coast Radio on US radio a few nights ago, and someone emailed me and suggested that they're convinced that the manuscript was written by lizards from outer space. living inside the Earth.
Yeah. No, that was me. No, just kidding.
Now I said to them, I hope not, because that means that we may be somebody's lunch quite soon.
I know.
But anyway, that was one idea which I haven't seen before.
Okay, well, so much for the lizard people. So next theory is that it's a hoax. There's a couple of different theories out there. One is that Voynich himself created this entire thing and made up that he bought it somewhere in Italy. And I think that's kind of unbelievable because, number one, why would anybody bother? But more importantly, the age of the materials. Did he happen to stumble across some vellum and some ink that was like 500 years old?
Yeah, I remember Bax had a pretty interesting take on this.
Yeah,
Dr.
he
Bax-
really did.
Yeah, Dr. Bax did.
Or illuminating.
Let's go to him.
A few years ago, the Yale Library, which owns the manuscript now, they got some people from the University of Arizona to look at the vellum and study it. So they took very tiny samples of the vellum from different parts of the manuscript. And they analysed them and found that they're very consistent in their dating to round about 1420, 1430, with a certain range, of course, but definitely it's 15th century. And that threw out a lot of the other theories. There were theories that it was made in the 17th century or that it was a 20th century hoax and so on. But unless somebody kept a large amount of expensive vellum for hundreds of years without using it, which seems a bit unlikely.
Yeah.
I reckon it's a 15th century manuscript. And also the ink, they've analysed the ink, and that's all entirely consistent with that date. There are no kind of modern chemicals in it and so on. So it seems to me that's one of the few things we can be pretty sure about, that it's a 15th century manuscript.
Another theory is that it was a hoax by Roger Bacon. Sir Roger Bacon. Was he Sir? Well, he was a knight, wasn't he?
I think so, yeah.
So Sir Roger Bacon. Some people have theorized that it was created by Roger Bacon. Bacon, as you know, is one of the original fathers of the scientific method, and Voynich himself believed that Bacon wrote the book and that only Bacon would have the capability of doing so. The problem with this theory is that Bacon died in 1294, which is long before the book was created.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, so that...
Unless somebody was copying his work like you had suggested.
That's a
and then it could
possibility.
have been Bacon.
Somebody could have copied it, but it wasn't Bacon. Yeah, it wasn't Bacon. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Well, no, I'm sorry.
Oh.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bacon didn't do it. It could have been a hoax. Somebody could have done it. Somebody could have done this as a hoax. The reason I don't think it was a hoax is this. Previously, I mentioned page 75, and I've found other pages that have some recurring words. So there's a word on here that I'll call Golf CC8G. So if you look at it, look at the...
I would say it was an A, actually.
Yeah? You think
Yeah.
so?
Golf A 83.
Yeah.
89.
So this is what I was talking about that recurred a couple of times in the page that you wouldn't expect to in any sort of
If it was a
sophisticated
cipher, right.
Right. Well, on the same page, this word appears like about 19 times. And
I was noticing that.
and small variations on the word. I've underlined them in different. The word itself I've underlined in orange, and the variations I've underlined in green. So have a look.
Yeah, so it looks a bit like there's the A, but also maybe it's like a C but maybe it's like 2 C's.
So it's a question of like, yeah, is this a small variation? Is this just bad handwriting, variations in handwriting? Because they're all slightly different, but it looks to me like just differences in handwriting.
I agree with that.
So the word
do you
the word appears like many, many, many times on this page, and sometimes it appears one right after the other. And so if you're trying to concoct a convincing hoax, especially if you're Sir Roger Bacon, a smart guy, then you're not going to do something as stupid as this unless you have utter contempt for the people you're trying to fool. And I think it goes for pretty much any hoaxer, that you're not going to repeat the word 40 times on a single page.
Steve looks really depleted.
Well, I know Joe and I briefly discussed this, is I see in the words that you've pointed out some similarities, but they're not identical to me. And when I look at them, let's just call it the last 3 characters, seem to be relatively consistent with the small variants, but let's just call them consistent.
Yeah.
But I don't see that means it's the same word. To me, it's the same thing as having ing at the end of something. So IMC, those all end in the same.
I guess for me to like take Joe's side on this, the first part looks really, really similar in all those words. There's just the middle, like 1 or 2 letters, depending on the word, that are a little different. And I think that, like, okay, so write believing 12 times in a row. It's not going to look the exact
No, it's not going to look identical. You're absolutely right.
And so that's what I think we're seeing is small handwriting variations. And
I know that you're looking at these, and some of these I'm looking at the same page as you are, and I don't think that they are identical. And let me just explain why.
okay.
Is if you look at words that are written in an older handwriting or even typesetting style, you can see, let's say, the letter F. There's what's known as a ligature, where 2 letters are joined. So if you have an FF, it can be just lowercase, right next to each other, or there's a ligature where the F's are actually connected to make what looks like one character, but it is one character in a typesetting perspective. But they're 2 different.
Yeah.
Some of those look like the cross of what we're saying is the F of golf. Sometimes seems to be short and contained. Sometimes seems to come across the L. And I don't disagree that maybe that is just handwriting. But to me, in a way, I almost wonder if they are different and distinct characters. I'm not disavowing what you're saying. I see intricacies in the letter forms that I don't know mean that they're the same, but it's handwriting. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it is hard to say. But
I have just drawn on this.
you did draw it. Yeah.
Do you know how much that's worth?
Yeah.
I know.
I've just drawn on this
stole
original
this out of the
stuff.
collection. I've been going over it with a highlighter. I'm gonna mail it back to them when we're done with this.
The way that the author forms the A, kind of, it's kind of like 2 C's. And I just drew on there. Joe's looking at it right now.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like, I think that's just handwriting. Like this one here, for example, there's 2 C's, but they're sort of like the second
Very
C is
close.
drawn. It's so close it almost looks like they're one character, but I think they're 2 C's.
This is not.
And this is why this has been going on for at least 100 years that we know of for sure, if not 3 or 4.
Yeah, I know exactly. But what I'm saying is that, like, as far as the hoax thing goes, the fact that this same word, and it appears to me to be the same word.
Steve, let's just accept.
And let's,
that it's
but
the same
Okay,
word.
well, I'm gonna run with it.
Okay.
Let's just accept that if you're doing a hoax, you're not going to do words that look very, very similar to the word right next to them.
Yeah.
Over and over again in your text. You're not going to do that because you want to have a really convincing hoax. So this is not the way to do it. So obviously these people were either very incompetent hoaxsters or it was not a hoax. All right, well, so much for the hoax. We've conclusively proven it's not a hoax. And so, well, not exactly. Because I mean, actually, if you're a hoaxer, you're probably kind of convinced that your readers are lazy. You're not going to get past the third page.
Yeah.
And this
They're
doesn't
just gonna
occur.
gloss over and over and
They're
over
just
and
going
over.
to sort of glance at it, look at the pictures, especially the naked bodies, stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So it
That's
may,
the blah blah blah. We should note that the words that we were just talking about are literally right next to a pool with a bunch of naked women in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
On to our next theory. The next theory is it's just gibberish. Gordon Rugg, a British psychologist, says that there's a case that it might just be entirely made up and just gibberish. He published a paper in 2004 saying that it's a hoax, most likely, and he had come up with a system that uses a grill of words.